So we have in lots of Western cultures very fast-paced, linear kinds uh, of schedules, and people complain, uh, I don't have time for that. I don't have enough time. I've often thought that the complaint of not enough time, if you pulled the string, if you actually pursued where does this sense of not enough time come from, you would end up looking at most of the dysfunctional factors in our the way our civilization is put together, and the fact that we don't have enough time to reflect on the fact that we don't have enough time is a pretty interesting feedback loop, pretty interesting trap to that we can't get out of because we don't have time to think and act outside of the too fast box. So we are seeking wisdom in our wise democracy, and we're looking for wholesome insights and changes. And if our schedule, if life is moving too fast and our schedules are too crowded, for us to be able to stop, take a break, time out, and be in a state of consciousness where things can emerge. I mean, leisure isn't just goofing off. Sleep is not just, stopping being sleepy. These nonlinear times allow space for things to bubble up. A lot of great discoveries and realizations have come after times. You do your intense work, and then you create space time and go for a walk or take a nap, and suddenly, bingo, things show up. A lot of these patterns came from me. I've been busy with these kinds of things most of my life, and then one morning in the wee hours, a whole pile of these patterns flooded out. And that was not a laborious process. It was a bubbling up. It just came bubble, bubble, bubble. So having enough time, and enough time is both dealing with quantity of time, also the quality of time, including the spacing, or excuse me, the pacing of that time. And wisdom, rather than just smartness, requires having enough reasonably paced time. And you want to have time to study. If you're dealing with some public issue, you want to have enough time to at least get the major dynamics understood. And the more time you have, the more you can delve into it. There are limits in the terms of, people have endless time. The critique is they'll fill that time. So if you give a citizen deliberative council 2 years, they will study it for 2 years. If you give them a week, they will study it for a week. And the difference between those might not be as great as you expected. And sometimes, depending on the quality of the study and what is actually being studied and how, you can end up just getting buried in greater and greater complexity and more confused. So it's not simply time, but it is, you need to provide enough time. You can't have, I've seen, we're going to solve the Social Security difficulty over Social Security, and we're going to involve 3,000 people, and we're going to do it in an afternoon. No, you aren't. There's no way to have adequate time to study the real complexity of Social Security in that kind of time. So there's this dance, but there's a bias towards having enough time, a bias towards asking, do we have enough time? Just like there's a bias towards asking, do we have the people we need to talk about this? And listening to each other. I don't need much time to make my own decision. I don't need to listen to you. I just make a decision in my life. I'm the dictator. I don't need time. But if we're going to be a democracy, particularly a wise democracy, we need to listen to each other and see what each other has to say, and have the benefit of the connection that results and the insights that result, being able to reflect individually and creatively and collectively. And nonlinear emergence, that kind of bubbling up I talked about, and the exercise of multiple intelligences. There was, I may have mentioned this in another one of the patterns, but there's one of the main crafters of of a very powerful dialogue method. David Bohm is a scientist, a quantum scientist, and he would have bodily intelligence where he would feel these quantum phenomena in his body, and then he would go home. He would go on a walk, and he'd just be feeling this, and then he'd go home and work out the mathematics that were associated with that feeling. So being able to exercise not just rational mind, but some people, to think better, they'll sit there and play music and it'll come to them. There's all these different intelligences that can be applied. And to understand that in our personal lives we need that, and in group process, the meetings have to be designed with the ability to take enough time to do the things you're asking people to do, and also reflection, non-controlled time should be woven into it, and multi-day events where you're sleeping, you're sort of living together and sleeping in between events. One day's the things that show up in one day can come up in the next day in new ways from realizations people had, or a growing sense of something that is kind of bubbles up over the night and then can show up in a clear way that can be dealt with the next day. Those are dynamics. And throughout a wisdom generating culture, I say, because if you have a culture where things are built to be now, fast, you can't do those things. You can't have a, listening and reflection and nonlinear multiple intelligence kind of contemplation. It's just not available to you, because you got to move on to the next thing. And so having a wisdom generating culture would recognize we need to deal with the time factor, and make sure people have enough time in their own lives and in any gatherings that we create to generate collective wisdom to do the job. So periods of silence and open space technology, especially multi-day open space technology. I am my own personal experience, multi-day open space technologies use time very powerfully, with the sleepovers being major impacts on what happens at the end. Pauses before responding. One of the interesting things from a housemate that I had who was from Finland is it's very hard for her communicating in the United States, because people talk really quickly. Somebody's finished, another person dives in. I have trouble with people who don't even wait for somebody to be finished. There's, some New York culture and Jewish culture and Italian culture where people talk over each other all the time. I don't know what to do about that. And there are ways of enforcing pauses. If it's not a cultural thing, you can cause people to stop. I don't know. I haven't researched it enough. There may be people who require the ability to talk over each other to think straight, and this may totally constrain them. It's like I have trouble walking slowly. I walk naturally very fast. So I don't know, that could be researched. But all deliberative process, I don't see the time factor. Are people being given enough time to do what they're being asked to do? I seldom hear that explicitly being addressed. And as far as I'm concerned, if you're doing a deliberative process, which includes choice creating, as far as I'm concerned, any kind of thinking deeply and seriously about something together, you need to ensure there's adequate and the right quality of time. So this is another one of those things I think needs to be added to most of the processes that I see.